Okay, well, welcome back. It's been a little while since I did this the last time, but we should have at least a interesting little stream this time. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, this is the broadcast portion of a project that I've started called Comics on Consoles, which deals primarily with uh, comic book based video games and trying to sort of explore and analyze them, since it doesn't really seem like they get a lot of attention anyway. So I'm Chris Clow. I'm the host of this whole effort, and I just released the podcast that accompanies this subject game. And the subject game, if you saw the info screen just a second ago, is Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, which is not exactly the most well-regarded comic book game in history. As you can probably imagine, if you're interested in comic book-based video games anyway, then you probably are at least a little bit familiar with the reputation that this game has, and it's not a positive one. And so one of the things that I tried to do in the podcast this month is explore what ultimately led to the creation of a game that's not exactly well liked and that doesn't exactly seem like a great deal of effort might have been put into it. But the gist of the podcast is that there were quite a few things going on behind the scenes that may have led to a rushed product and to a product that really wouldn't meet anyone's expectations for being good. So with the broadcast, what we're going to do is actually take a look at the game and see what the deal is exactly. So let me, why don't we jump right in here? And just so you guys know, if you're watching this live on Twitch, then please feel free to participate in the chat log, and we'll jump right to it. I already see we have one person participating, so hey Ryan, thanks for jumping back in. And let's go to it. I actually have to put the game in, so give me 1 second, and we will get started. So I'm actually going to be using an original Xbox for this, and here is the actual game case. Something kind of interesting. So the game was released on the GameCube and the Xbox. And on the GameCube, they actually have the full subtitle Battle for Atlantis on the cover art. But that's not the case with the Xbox version. The Xbox version just calls the game Aquaman on both the cover and the spine, and also on the back as well. But then if you actually open it up, they include the appropriate subtitle on the instruction booklet. So I'm not really sure why that's the case. It seems like that might have created maybe a little more work. But, you know, it is what it is. So I think the game should be starting here in just a second from the... Well, you know, it wouldn't be a Comics on Consoles broadcast if things completely behaved in the way that I wanted them to. Let's try putting it in again, and hopefully that'll work this time. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting started. Interesting. So we actually have someone participating in the chat log right now who has actually worked for TDK Media Active, at least to a degree. So that's cool. Very interesting, Ryan. Thanks for sharing that. So there's TDK Media Active, and of course, we're going through the depths of the ocean as we get ready to actually play. And there's the logo of Lucky Chicken, the unfortunate souls who were enlisted with actually creating the game, and of course DC Comics has to put their name on it. And, you know, they did so willfully, and they probably shouldn't have even okayed this, but because that's kind of the gist of the podcast. So let's actually take a look at this opening video, because this is, you know, these opening intro videos, especially back then in 2003, you know, you kind of had to put your best foot forward. to actually show what the game's all about. So here's the Atlantean environments that Lucky Chicken actually created for the game. And, you know, they don't look too bad. That's kind of one of the things that I talk about in the podcast, is that the overall graphical look isn't terrible. It's not a masterpiece by any means. And then there's, of course, is the golden mulleted Peter David iteration of Aquaman, who had already kind of not been active in the comics. And this score is composed by Tommy Tallarico, who actually is kind of well known among gaming music enthusiasts as creating some live concerts that kind of celebrate video game music. And, you know, I'll let you listen to it a little. You can sort of see some of the combos that you can pull off. But, you know, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis is, you know, the controls aren't exactly the best element of the game. I mean, there's really no solidly good element of this game, unfortunately. But, you know, the combo system in particular was just very confusing, because you'll see in some of the loading screens when we actually transition in between levels that the combos can be extremely long and very difficult to actually memorize. So it's, you know, it's definitely interesting. So why don't we actually get ready to dive into the game? So there you see the title. And also, too, right here, Battle for Atlantis is on the title screen, but not on the Xbox box art, which, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just something that I find a little confusing. So I actually have played through this whole game before. So one of the things that I want to highlight here at the beginning when we start a new game, so right there, one of the things that I mentioned in the podcast, and if you actually take a look at some of the other critiques for this game that have existed in the past, there's a character select screen right there up top. And because I've already beaten the game, I have the option of choosing Classic Aquaman, which I'll show you for the duration of my playthrough. But I think when you play through other difficulties, you actually unlock 2 other characters. So we can move to question mark, and so if you've never actually played the game before, you can choose between Aquaman and question mark, which confused a lot of people. But the other 2 characters that you can actually play as are Tempest, who used to be known as Aqualad, and Black Manta himself, the archenemy of the Sea King. So let's play on normal. And we'll take a look at one of the things that kind of has defined this game's bad reputation, and that's the complete and utter lack of vocal performances. There's no voice acting in this game whatsoever. So let's give it a start, and you can see some of these comic book panels right here after the loading screen. So it kind of, I mean, if you're familiar with Aquaman, then it kind of makes it obvious right up front that the true enemy of the game is his brother Orm, otherwise known as Ocean Master. So they try and do this kind of bait and switch thing with the story by setting up Black Manta as the big bad of the game. But by the time you actually get to the end, you know, most Aquaman fans that may have played this will probably figure out, well, you said brother, and Orm is definitely Orin's brother. So, and that's just one of the things, because I am an Aquaman fan. I mean, I'm not the biggest Aquaman fan compared with some other people that I know, but I do really love the character and think that he is the most underrated member of the Justice League. So the fact that this game was released kind of tends to rub me the wrong way a little bit, because it's very clear, and that's one of the things that I explore in the podcast, is that it's very clear that this game is not going to be the best foot forward for TDK Mediactive or DC Comics in their licensing efforts to actually get an Aquaman game made. So a character that already has problems succeeding with the public at large would have needed a great game to actually get the idea across that he was a character worth getting behind. and this just wasn't it. So it likely did some further damage to Aquaman's already damaged public perception. So Mission 1, Disturbing Developments, is a lot like the other 19 missions. You're pretty much going to see exactly what this game is all about right here from the beginning. So here's the beginning. Rescue 8 Atlantean citizens, and I'm using the classic Aquaman skin just to change things up a little bit, since most people have probably already seen the flowing golden mullet of the Peter David rendition of the character. So I'm playing this on the original Xbox with my Logitech wireless controller, and the controls are thus. Right trigger actually engages the forward swim, and the other buttons are pretty much reserved for combat. So X is a strike, Y is a kick, B is a right hand, and then A is actually block, which is kind of unusual in and of itself. But you can also take a look at the environments here, and no, they're not spectacular. I mean, it's pretty clear right from the front of the game that it's not exactly a graphical powerhouse, but there are some flourishes that make it at least fun to look at. Unfortunately, with my capture card, you can't see that it actually runs natively at 60 FPS, which is, isn't a big deal, but it helps. I'm presenting it in 30 right now, but you can see the beams of light sort of coming in from the top of the ocean, and I actually think those look kind of nice. But let's actually get started with the main elements of game. Hit my head on some Atlantean submarines, that's great. You guys probably shouldn't hit your king in the head, but oh well. So let's go over in here and fight some of the morays. And this is pretty much it. This is pretty much the entirety of the game, is fighting morays, and they introduce a couple of other enemy types, and we get into it here. So I'm trying to save the mermen from captivity at the hands of Black Manta's creatures, and so there we go, there's one saved. And so one of the things you can also actually see in the UI, once we actually get back into another combat scenario, is that there are these tokens with letter A's underneath the life bar and the stamina bar, which you can see up there. So if I actually hit, well here, let me save it for another enemy, since I've pretty much already beaten this guy. He stops, there we go. So I'll go up to the next enemy here, who's actually got the merman, and when you hit the left trigger, you actually call on a creature from the ocean to beat the enemy up for you. You can also actually use Aquaman's hook hand in combat, but I actually don't quite know how that mechanic works, because it seems like it works sometimes and doesn't work for most of the time. But I mean, trying to go back into the mindset from which this game was released back in 2003, it's pretty easy to see why this wasn't exactly a critical darling. I mean, 2003, comic book culture and comic book characters were already starting to make a pretty big presence in the minds of the public, and I mean, you had DC characters present in animation, in the really good animated works of Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, and Justice League and Justice League Unlimited were running around this time. But I mean, Aquaman still wasn't the most well-regarded character, and then this comes out when you might start to think, oh, maybe it's worth playing, and then you actually get your hands on it, and it's just not the case. And so we'll go over here and free the next merman. But see, and one of the things that I kind of explained in the podcast as well is that this game is, it's not the kind of bad game that's difficult to play. Because it's so shallow, and because there's really not a lot of complexity to what you're doing, you can probably beat it. If you were really sat down, hunkered down, and devoted yourself to it, you could probably beat it in a couple of hours at the most. And I mean, the longest thing that you actually have to sit through in playing this game is the very slow progression of the comic book cutscenes, if you can even call them that. It's more like a slideshow than anything else. But I mean, this is there aren't too many ways I can slice this. I mean, this is pretty much all that you're going to be doing. So this is a far less interesting stream than what we did last month, because Batman Begins was obviously very important in laying the groundwork for what we would ultimately get from the Arkham games. And comparatively, this just is not anything resembling a substantive video gameplay experience. But I mean, I guess that there's sort of a satisfying element to the combat. It's just so repetitive that it kills any satisfaction you can actually glean from the act of playing the game. And so, you know, we're not going to spend too much time with it compared to the other ones, because the real story about this game, and one of the things that I tried to emphasize in the podcast, is that, you know, with most people, the actual narrative elements surrounding the production of Battle for Atlantis begin and end with the fact that it's a bad game. But one of the things that I tried to detail in the podcast is my effort to actually talk with someone who helped to make the game. And what I found out about it just from that effort alone kind of puts an entirely other perspective on what can happen with a release like this. Because, you know, you probably have seen people like the Angry Video Game Nerd or JonTron talk about bad video games, and this video game in particular. They've both spent some time talking about this one. And there's a lot of humor to be had in how bad of a game this is. But you don't really tend to think too much about the real people that were actually charged with creating this and putting it out for players, and the impact that can have on them as well as their careers. So be sure to listen to the podcast, because that's definitely one of the things, and the primary thing that's emphasized in this month's issue. So I hope you give it a shot. Now we've only got one more merman to save, so let's go kick the crap out of these guys and save the last merman, and then we can move on to another mission. Now there is another mission type in Battle for Atlantis. In fact, you might be forgiven if you're not actually playing it to think that there might be at least some conceptual similarity with a game like Star Fox. Where you're flying a submarine. Here, let me just finish this guy off with a shark. But you know, it's nowhere near as nuanced as that kind of gameplay experience. So I'll let you see this this slideshow of story. And there's Volko, the ever-present assistant to the King of Atlantis. And you know, just as a fan of Aquaman, I find it a little bit confusing that they went with the Peter David iteration of the character for this game, because as I mentioned in the podcast, at the time that this game was released, they had just started a brand new ongoing Aquaman series. And one of the things that it did is actively transition Arthur back from this look that you see here in these cutscenes to the more traditional look that you can see on my shirt and in the game model that I'm actually using. So I'm not going to save it, because I don't think I'm going to come back to this anytime soon. So there's Black Manta, who's got one of the most cumbersome looking helmets in all of comics, but who's actually a very, very interesting villain. One of the things that makes Black Manta so interesting is in the 70s, when you actually see him with his helmet off for the first time, and you realize that he's an African American and that his name is also a statement of his race, in addition to trying to sound threatening within the context of where he primarily operates. But Jeff Johns did a lot of interesting things with Black Manta recently in Brightest Day from about 5 years ago, which was the series that followed upon the events of Blackest Night after Aquaman was actually resurrected from the dead. And he just emphasized his viciousness. He's an extremely brutal villain, and you can see from the beginning the conflict that is ever present between Aquaman and Black Manta, and how Black Manta really is and should be considered one of the top tier villains in the DC universe, right up there with the likes of Lex Luthor and the Joker, or also as Jeff Johns did with Sinestro when he was writing Green Lantern. So let's go over here. So we have to save the science buildings within the monarchy of Atlantis, but there's no actual reason to save the science buildings. That's one of the things that makes this level in particular so thin, is that, you know, there's no life to the science buildings, and there's no time limit that you have to try and beat. I'm actually getting my ass kicked here right now, but so I mean, it's mostly just for show. It's mostly just an aesthetic thing. Oh no, they're blowing up the buildings. Let's try and stop them. And you know, one of the things that I couldn't find out is if you know, the development for this game started relatively late in the process, or if this was actually you know, the concerted effort of over a year of work. But I have a hard time believing that, just because the experience is so thin, and because of the general feeling that seems to be prevalent among people that had actually worked on the game. So there's 28 mores that I have to defeat here in order to beat the level. So you can see just how repetitive this game is, and I'm not really doing much besides button mashing. If you go to the pause menu, you can take a look at the combo list. So, well, here's the control layout using the Duke controller as the diagram. Let's look at the combo list. So there's these great names, you know, Force of the Sea, Raging Storm, Ocean's Might, Depth Smasher, Neptune's Reckoning. But you know, you take a look at them, and they're kind of ridiculously long. Look at that. Look at Atlan's Glory. How are you supposed to actually put that in? I mean, this puts a lot of fighting games to shame, and what are the animations that actually lead to? I actually don't know, because I haven't been able to pull these off. The cadence of the combat is so difficult to follow that you can't really feasibly enter these in. So BX, YY, BXXX, BXYX, BBB, XBB. Really? I mean, you got to give them credit insofar as, you know, they want to try and add something to the actual combat, but I really don't know. I mean, unless you're like a hardcore fighting game enthusiast where you have every combo in Street Fighter memorized and you can twitch your hands to actually pull all of them off, I have a hard time actually having the memorizing capacity to actually, you know, not print a list like this out and refer to it, or pull it up on my phone and always look at it. I wouldn't be able to pull these off. I mean, would you guys? It's pretty crazy. And I appreciate that perspective, Ryan, because that's, you know, certainly one of the things that I had to infer about the game was how the license was actually put up and how it was acquired. So I appreciate that perspective, especially from someone who actually works in the gaming industry. So let's jump back in here. Let's try and beat these mores into submission so that we can move on to, I think mission 3 is one of the submarine missions. So we'll get to one of the submarine missions, and maybe one more repetitive button-mashing beat-em-up mission, and then I'll just call it from there, and I'll let you know what the subject is going to be for next month. And hopefully I'll be able to get that episode to you a little bit earlier than I was able to get this one to you, but we'll see. I'll be sure to keep everybody who's interested updated on the various social media accounts that I have set up for the show. But let's keep swimming. We've got 20 more. Oh my god. We've got 20 more guys to beat up. So let's just get to it. I wish I had more of these. I've only got one left. But it is kind of fun watching. Oh geez, look at this guy. Let me get rid of him. The Dreadnought. Okay, so now I've used up all my sharks and dolphins. So let's try and get one of these combos. BXX, BY, BX. I don't even know. I would have loved to have actually been in the office one day when they were making this game to see what the attitude was from the developers, because from what I understand, this was not a fun experience. And it would have been interesting to see what it was actually like in the trenches at Lucky Chicken as they were developing this game. I'm actually getting kind of beat up here. Let me see if I can get this life. There we go. It would be pretty embarrassing if I hit a game over screen on the broadcast. But let's keep moving. So 14, so we're halfway there. I'm pretty much just hitting X and Y, although I should probably be conscious of blocking a little bit, because it looks like a block actually prevents any damage. Oh, but then they grab me. Can I grab? Which button is grab? There it is. It's black. What does white do? Doesn't look like white does that. Maybe white is the hook hand, but I'm not exactly sure how I'm able to pull that up, like I said. And the hook hand might not even be able to be used with the classic Aquaman skin. I'm not sure. So can I grab the Dreadnought here? No. Just gotta kind of... gotta block. See, this kind of makes me want to play Injustice with Aquaman, because that's definitely a combat system that I can get behind. But we'll power through this. I've got a couple of psionic calls to the creatures of the sea, so that'll make this a little bit faster than it would have been. So it looks like we've got a couple of people watching. So have you guys actually played this game? Ryan, I'm pretty sure that you've played this game, because you and I seem to have similar tastes and affinities for comics-based video games. So what was your experience like in playing this game? Try to beat this up here. There we go. Oh boy. Well, we'll keep it going. Wow, you got it during release month. That's pretty impressive. You know, I didn't even know this game existed probably until about 5 years after it was released. But I always liked Aquaman. Now, when you bought it, did you buy it for the GameCube or for the Xbox? Alright, so we've only got 4 more. 4 more, let's power through it. You know, I actually got Dark Tomorrow, I think within a week that it came out. I remember going to Toys R Us and buying it, and going to Toys R Us and buying a video game was such a cool experience, because you had to get the little cardboard tab, you had to buy it up front, and then they would go in the back. It was almost like a secret mission, and actually they had to go back and actually bring it out to you, and it was such a cool experience that just doesn't seem to exist today. I loved the experience of buying a video game at Toys R Us. But I actually had rented Dark Tomorrow first before I decided to buy it, and I still bought it. I still bought it even after having played it on a rental. I've spent way too much money on that game, but that's gonna be an awesome episode of this show once we get to it, and we're gonna be getting to it pretty early on in 2016. Just so you know, if you're interested in explorations of other poorly regarded comic book video games, Batman Dark Tomorrow is going to be coming up pretty soon in 2016. Alright, so I think this is the last guy, so let's just get the hammerhead shark to take care of him. Oh, no, got one more. Alright. And let's just finish him off that way. Oh, we'll see. We will see about that, Ryan. We'll see if you put me to shame, because I own more than one copy of it, and I think I've got all of the comics as well. But we'll save that for that show. So, appears that their main goal will be the treasury. And you know, the dialogue isn't great. And there's Mira, the queen of Atlantis. Let's just skip it because I want to see if okay, so there's Manta coming up with his plans to take out Atlantis, and it's deceptive. It's still pushing forward. That, like, when you actually play through the full story of this game, it keeps pushing the idea of Manta as the prime enemy almost to the very end. Like, I had actually forgotten all about Orm. Okay, yeah, so here, this is going to be one of the submarine levels. But I had actually forgotten all about Orm, and then it was like the final 2 or 3 missions that you actually face off against Ocean Master. So we're kind of winding down here. We'll put... Yeah, absolutely. Ryan makes a good point about it shows that there wasn't a lot of effort put into this game from the budgetary side of things, because there's no voice acting and because these cutscenes aren't even animated. You know, they're just pictures. So they really must not have had a lot of money to work with. And I don't know if this game was conceived as a full-price title, but I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like it. This just screams budget. So we'll go into mission 3, testing the waters, which is one of the submarine. But you get this, I think, every few missions, and it kind of helps to break up the monotony. But so we're flying around in this submarine, and you can actually destroy other enemies. So you got to be careful. I can't remember which button the missiles are, but there are missiles. Oh, and you can actually switch to a, no, the missiles are X. Switch to a cockpit view by hitting the white button. So we got the laser beams, and we got the missiles, and you can lock on, and you know, the UI even has a pretty simplistic overall look to it. But again, you know, it all comes down to time and money. And one of the things I try to emphasize with the podcast is that, you know, the actual people at Lucky Chicken Games are probably not the ones you want to blame primarily for this game. It goes back to TDK, the amount of resources that they put into it, and it also goes back to Warner Brothers in DC for licensing the game out to TDK, because I mean, there's just not much to this. And so I'll launch a missile. Oh, I don't know why that enemy exploded before the missile got to him, but it is what it is. I'm not sure if that's 3 out of 4 waves, or if this is something else, or are they blowing something up? I'm having a hard time actually seeing. Okay, there's some. And you know, the camera is pretty finicky Uh-oh, I think I just got rid of my shield. It seems really twitchy and over-responsive, and it kind of makes it difficult to actually control, especially in this. Yeah, and you know, you make a good point, Ryan. For those of you that can't see in the chat log, he says that, you know, filmmakers don't actively try to make bad movies, and that's absolutely true, and it's the same of game developers. No one wants to make a bad game. And I think we get a little too harsh on game developers sometimes, especially when it comes to these licenses. Because it's already part of such a big machine. I mean, even a character like Aquaman, who's not particularly well liked by this point, who's getting better. We're certainly not all the way there yet. Maybe Jason Momoa can help change that after the release of Dawn of Justice next year. But, you know, Aquaman is not that well regarded, and he certainly wasn't well regarded in the early 2000s. Oh, see, I'm about to lose this mission, so they're actually blowing these up. But I can't find them anywhere. See, now I'm actually focusing. I'm actually focusing. Well, hey, that's, you know, that's something. But, you know, the Lucky Chicken was a small developer at the time, and, you know, they're not around anymore. Many of the people that made up Lucky Chicken are around in another company, and I think they develop games primarily for mobile platforms. But, I mean, a pretty small developer having to deal with the large machine of a license, even a license as small in stature as Aquaman, you know, it's probably difficult for them. Oh, did I win? I did! How about that? So we saved the Atlantean hydrothermal plant, which is spectacular. I was really worried about that for a second. But you know, it also goes back to what actually would make a good Aquaman game. I mean, you can't really make an Arkham for Aquaman and celebrate the things that make him interesting. So if you actually did make a solo dedicated Aquaman video game experience that could be considered good, what would that actually entail? It would take a talented developer, and it would take the resources to actually make the game good in the first place. But you know, it's kind of hard to say. Maybe that's why Aquaman largely only appears alongside other DC characters, and why this stands as his one and only solo video game appearance thus far. So we'll play one more mission, because there are about 20, I think, anyway. There's between 20 and 25 total. The vast majority of them are go around and beat people up, and then there's a few of those submarine missions interspersed within them, and they're not any more complicated than what you just saw. If you actually ever did want to seek this game out and play it, you actually can play it on an Xbox 360 through backward compatibility. It is one of the games that from the original Xbox library that you can play. And, you know, if you have an original Wii or a GameCube, then you can play the GameCube version that way. But, I mean, don't expect a life-changing experience by any means. Yeah, and, you know, that's one of the things that I did want to emphasize, Ryan, is that Aquaman's powers... Oh, so I actually have to get the bombs. So this one actually is timed. It gives you a fair amount of time. It gives you 6 minutes. So let me see... We gotta beat these guys up and get the bomb. But yeah, Aquaman's powers are really unique, and he's a badass. There's no real other way to put it. He is such a cool character, and he's, you know, he's so angry and so protective of his domain. There is a good game that could be there. but it's all about finding the right people to actually make it. I mean, you don't really get the sense in this game that he can swim 2 miles per second. You don't really get the sense in this game that he can be as strong as Superman. And you don't really get the sense in this game that he can see clearly in what would be considered total darkness to a human being because of the way that light travels under the ocean. You don't emphasize when playing this game that he's bulletproof and knife-proof because he can go to the depths of the ocean and withstand the intense oceanic pressures. I mean, there are really cool elements to Aquaman that just don't get a lot of play because people can look at him a little too readily as a joke. And that's one of the things that I wanted to try and emphasize to people that might not be all that familiar with him. If you're not all that familiar with Aquaman and you're interested in checking out some good Aquaman comic book stories, you know, then... Oh, what button do I actually push to get this? I don't know. Then, you know, check out Peter David's run. Check out... let me see if I can back up to actually get this bomb, because I think in the regular game you get the bomb with the hook hand. But Peter David's run is very good. Pick up The Trench, which is Jeff Johns' first story of Aquaman from the New 52. Very well regarded and very popular. For the first 6 months that that series was running, it outsold every single Marvel title. And, you know, a lot of that has to... Okay, there we go. A lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, it's Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis. It's the same people from Blackest Night that are creating Aquaman stories. But a lot of it is also due to the fact that it's just good comic book storytelling. And I would encourage anyone to actually give it a try. So yeah, it doesn't look like I can use the hook hand. So you can just throw the bomb. So you have to save the buildings by getting the bombs, but you can throw the bombs into the buildings and save them for some reason, which is a little bit strange. I'm actually running kind of low on time here. I don't know how many other ones. See, and there's so many enemies, and they just kind of wander towards you. It doesn't seem like Aquaman or these enemies are treading water very well. So there's kind of a combo that works. X, Y, B? Oh, now I can't do it. Okay, there we go. So where's the next bomb? There it is. Oh, I have to beat up this giant dreadnought. Come on! Come on! I don't think it says how many bombs I actually have to destroy. It's not even disarm, you just blow them up. I mean, this dreadnought is just blocks so many things, and so you have like 4 enemies engaging you all at once, but you don't really have the capacity to engage them effectively. So I might actually lose this mission. I'm running out of time. And I'm probably not giving it my best effort, but you know, it is what it is. I have to grab him. Oh, I can grab him too. And that took care of him. Okay. So just throw it back down. Okay, so I've got 2 more and I've got 1 minute. So let's see if I can do it. Because you got to cover a lot of ground too, or a lot of water, I should say. Okay, so I can just grab this one and throw it. That's 4. I can't actually go over this building. There's an invisible wall. No matter. 30 seconds. Where the hell is it? Oh no. Oh no. What did I do? Oh no, now I'm in a fight. I just lost this mission. Well, in any event, I think that I have... Oh, so there it goes. Boom. Game over. What an appropriate screen to actually end the broadcast on. I mean, I would keep it going, but there's just not really much of a reason to. I mean, the game is a very thin experience, and one of the things that I emphasize in the podcast as well is that, you know, there are two kinds of bad games. There are the ones that are very much unplayable because of the way in which they're constructed, and then there are the other ones that are just such thin experiences that they do everything they're designed to do, but what they're designed to do just isn't substantive whatsoever. And this is the latter. This is the kind of bad game that is easy to play. You could probably beat it within a couple of hours, like I said earlier, but there's just not really anything there to justify a lot of really intense focus on actually beating it. It's just a very thin experience. And, you know, given the resources that Lucky Chicken probably had allocated to them by TDK Mediactive, it's not much of a surprise that this game ended up that way. So be sure to listen to the podcast for this episode, because I actually detail some of my efforts to actually seek out people that worked on the game. And, you know, I came up short, but I actually did find out some interesting things because of those efforts specifically. So that is pretty much it for Aquaman Battle for Atlantis. You can get most of the story in the podcast, and of course we will be back next month. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to explore for issue number 3 is this idea of games based on comic book movies that are actually better than the movies, primarily. And, you know, some people might feel differently about this example, but there are some video games out there that I enjoy playing more than I enjoy watching the movies, and this is one of those instances. So issue number 3, which will be out sometime in November, will focus on 2003's Hulk, developed by Radical Entertainment. Sorry about that, I didn't have my audio there, but it will focus on 2003's Hulk, developed by Radical Entertainment and published by Vivendi Universal Games. And it is it's actually a really interesting experience, primarily because it spends a lot of its time actually devoting two very different types of gameplay into emphasizing, I guess, the duality of Bruce Banner and the Hulk. And one of the best things about it is that it serves as a stepping stone to what a lot of people consider to be the very best video game featuring the Hulk that has ever been made. So that's what's going to be the focus for issue number 3. You know, be sure to engage with me on any of the social media outlets that I have set up. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, I welcome any feedback that I can get based around my efforts for doing this show. And I really appreciate anyone that expresses their support for it. That's what keeps me doing it. You know, I'm not doing this for money or for anything other than the fact that I enjoy playing these games and I enjoy talking about them. So thank you very much for jumping into issue number 3. And yes, Ryan, Green Lantern Rise of the Manhunters is a good example of that, although I'm a little more forgiving of that movie than most people. But that will be an interesting episode as well. But in any event, thank you guys for checking out the broadcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And we will see you again next month. Thanks. Take care.